welcome. Thank you so much for being here, Sam.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
You have an incredibly harrowing story where your life was taken over and consumed by endometriosis, but you had no idea that endo was causing all of your health issues. I am so grateful for you sharing with us this story because I know many can resonate with it, and that some people out there who might be going through similar symptoms are having possibly a future aha moment by listening to what you have to share today.
Absolutely. And I'm more than happy to talk about it. I've dedicated the past, honestly, 4 years of my life to finding out what's going on with me. And I've learned a lot, done a lot of research. So me giving back is the least that I can do. So if I can help another woman out there struggling with this, what you and I went through, happy to do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Now let's walk back 4 years ago. What was and I really want to go to the first day because you're an athlete, you're a professional athlete. Your body is your occupation. Being in tip-top shape is what you do in order to have a livelihood. It's your passion. What was the first day where you thought, that's weird. That feels a little off. And then everything just kind of snowballed from there.
Yes. So I played professional golf. I grew up in a golfing family, played competitive junior golf, college golf, and then I played on tour for a short stint. And you're right, it was very demanding mentally and physically. The first time that I really noticed that something was wrong, I was actually in a collegiate golf tournament. And these aren't just 1-day events. These are 4-day events. You walk 36 holes on Monday, and then you play another 18 holes on Tuesday. And I remember the timing was horrible, and I started my period during the tournament. And I don't know if it was because I was so stressed, I was thinking about my game, trying to perform. My period was so heavy. I was trying to carry my clubs, play good golf, and manage my period symptoms, which out of the blue, I was like, this is not what the past cycles have been like. So that was the first time. I was about 20 years old when that happened. And then from that point, I was like, okay, maybe it's just an off month, and it just continued. But I'm like, okay, that's probably just me getting older. Like, I don't know how, periods progress as you age. So I just kind of battled through it, didn't say anything, didn't bring it up to my mom or sister or a doctor. And the next 4 years, I just kind of went through that, and then the pain progressed. And eventually it was to the point where I couldn't even walk, cramps were that painful. So at that point, I was like, something is not right.
And when you say cramps were that painful, what would you liken it to? I know for me, sometimes it would feel like a piece of hot coal, like on fire, if I could imagine it, or a serrated knife just kind of pulling down.
Yep, very similar to that. And almost like someone was like grabbing my organs and like nerves and like squeezing them. Like it almost felt like a very bad contraction. I've never had kids, but I can imagine from what I've heard from friends and family that that's what it feels like. And it was just debilitating.
Yeah. Well, when you think about what endometriosis is too, it is like a chewing gum kind of material that's just wrapping
Yes.
your organs and creating all kinds of disarray within your system. So for you, when did you go to the doctor? Was it when you were in debilitating pain, or was it when you started having additional symptoms?
It was the moment I was like, okay, I can't walk. I was like, I need to see a doctor. And I'm a person who doesn't like to take medicine. I try to be holistic as I can, but I was like, I need to see a gynecologist. And Diana, I made an appointment I was living in LA at this point at UCLA. And I saw a gynecologist, and she did a not a sonogram,
Ultrasound?
not a pap smear, ultrasound. she did an ultrasound on me and she goes, she goes, you have PCOS. And I'm like, what is PCOS? And she goes, oh, it's these cysts and, they're inflamed. She goes, why don't we put you, or put an IUD in you? And I was like, okay. I was like, well, let me think about it. She goes, no. She goes, we'll do it today. She goes, it's going to take away the pain. It's going to calm down the inflammation. And I was like, I just didn't get a good feeling. I heard some things about it and I was like, let me do a little more research. So I held off on that. And then I was glad I thought I knew the answer. And I was like, well, I don't want to do an IUD. Maybe I just keep letting the pain, muscling through it each month.
Mhm.
And so I let another probably year and a half go by before I really had to go back and revisit my condition.
For you, your endometriosis resulted in lung complications. Can you
Yes.
explain that? Because you went from not being able to walk to then having feelings in your lungs that were not right and could have been very dire for you.
Right. So, like I said, a year and a half went by. I was living my normal life, going to work, seeing friends. I had to take a work trip to San Francisco. And Diana, something so strange happened. When I landed at SFO, I was getting my carry-on off of, from the above luggage. And I was walking off the plane and I got this extreme, extreme back pain. And then it started to crawl up my shoulder into my left side. And so I get off the plane, barely able to carry my bag and walk. And I was like, okay, something is really not right. And I am a person that does not want attention on me. I don't want to cause a scene. But I called my sister and I was like, hey, I started to panic. I was like, I can't breathe right now. I said, I don't know what's going on. I said, my friend's about to pick me up. What should I do? She goes, Sam, don't leave the airport. Have them look at you. There's a medical team. She said, go to the gate, talk to the people. So I did. Diana, I could barely talk at this point. I had no breath. And they were like, are you having a panic attack? The ambulance came in, they put me on a stretcher. They were trying to get answers from me and I couldn't talk. And eventually we got to the hospital down the street. And the doctor, they did x-rays, put me on oxygen. And once I could finally calm down, she came in and said, you have a collapsed lung. And I mean, for me, I've never smoked, haven't done drugs. I'm a relatively healthy person. So I was so confused how I could have a collapsed lung. And she goes, you have these blebs in your lungs that just burst and it collapsed your lung. So she goes, we're going to wait on surgery. She goes, if it happens again, we do need to get you into surgery. So I said, okay. And I told my family. And from that point, my mom is an angel. She is the one who really deep dived into everything for me and wanted to figure out what was going on. Because doctors, the thoracic surgeon was like, okay, you have blebs. And then remembering a year ago, I have this PCOS, and somehow, Diana, my mother put the two together. She goes, what if your PCOS or period symptoms are affecting your lung?
Mhm.
And that is when we got introduced to Dr. Cameron Najat. Well, it wasn't a short process either. This was going through 6 specialists at UCLA, the Mayo Clinic. I mean, I really dedicated a year with my mother to finding an answer. Because like you said, thoracic endometriosis is not a thing. It's a very small percent of women that have that condition. So these doctors, I was almost like a medical mystery. So people were trying to help me sort out what, the causation could be. But most of the doctors I met with at UCLA just wanted to use Lupron. And the male doctor was like, well, why don't we trial Lupron and see if it stops the these symptoms that you're having. And that's for me, I want to attack the root cause. I don't want a band-aid.
Right.
So we said, no, thank you. And we eventually, like I said, got introduced to Cameron Najat, and he worked with a thoracic surgeon at Stanford who understood that, yeah, there is research that you could have endo in your lungs. So yeah, I'll pause right there because that was a lot to say, but
That's an incredible amount. And it's very important because as much as we keep talking about extra pelvic endo, it needs to be talked about more, because there are people who are dealing with similar symptoms to yours and maybe don't have the ability to see a specialist or know where to go. And this just gives them a little bit more fire in their belly to advocate for their health, because as you said, this was incredibly serious. When you said blubs, can you explain a little bit what is that?
so the blebs, they're actually little air blebs that, for me, I have the condition that I was diagnosed with is sporadic pneumothorax. And it happens to, like I said, a very small percent of people, men and women. It's more common in tall, skinny males. So the fact that I was a female and I had this, it was kind of rare itself, but I am tall. I'm 5'9". I'm very slim. And you have just extra spaces in your chest cavity. And it's just kind of like a freak medical thing. And these blebs just kind of form because there's that extra space. And if you're lucky or unlucky, they can burst and it can be fatal. There's a tension pneumothorax. So at this point, I had to quit work. Golf was put on hold, and this is something that me and my family all focused on.
Yeah, it does take a family effort. And I want to go back to the surgery because, like you said, you needed a specialized surgeon for that. What was your recovery process like?
It was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, Diana. It was going back to Cameron Najat and my thoracic surgeon at Stanford, we had to decide, okay, do we attack the endo first and get that out of your system, or do we do the lung surgery? And the lung surgery really, it staples up your lung to make sure that it doesn't collapse. So it's a very invasive, not fun surgery. And we thought that the lung surgery came first. And that way she could see if there was endo in there and if it is correlated to my other condition. So the recovery process, it's they go in and basically, like I said, staple your lung. And then 6 days after the surgery, you have a chest tube in you, helping the air escape. So I was awake for 5 days with a chest tube, extremely painful, not fun. They had to remove the tube while I was awake. And yes, so that in itself was traumatizing, but Diana, there is a happy ending to that. My thoracic surgeon actually did not luckily find endo growing in my lungs. She thought there was a chance it could come from my diaphragm and into it. So luckily, like I explained, it was just the blebs. It was this other condition that wasn't correlated, thank God, because that would be more of a lifelong concern, obviously. So I really lucked out there, but I'm so happy and grateful that, I had to have that lung surgery because I was introduced to Cameron Najat, who is just one of the pioneers of endometriosis laparoscopy surgery. So thank God I met him. And then a year later, it took some time for the lung to heal. So a year later, he was able to go in, and I had endometriosis lesions, all of it on 21 organs in my body. So he was like, you have stage 4 endo and we need to get this out ASAP.
Yeah, it's they always say early intervention, right? As soon as you can, educate, advocate. But I'm always like, what about the percentage of us who already are stage 4, so advanced, have it permeating into our bodies, our organs, affecting fertility, affecting quality of life? Um, it is, once it gets there, it's like, what do you do? And that's an ongoing question that I keep asking, is what do we do, because we're at that stage. I'm turning 40 in February, and you think as you get older it should get better, but that's also a myth in itself too. So it's like, it's one of those mystery illnesses that really demands attention and research
Yes.
funding. And thankfully there's been so much growth over the last decade, even
Mhm.
the cause of endo, and there is somewhat of a correlation genetically. And your
Mhm.
mom, who is your medical advocate and your angel, she was able to figure out that she might have had endometriosis that wasn't diagnosed. Can you explain a little bit of that? Because I found her story to be just just devastating, honestly, that she was living this way and didn't even know.
Yes. So as all of this madness is going on with me, she's going to her own doctor's appointments, and I either did an MRI or an X-ray, and the results came back, and the doctor goes, you don't have a kidney. It died probably some years ago. And my mother had no idea. And luckily, she is a very healthy person, and doesn't take a lot of medicine, just eat clean. So her body has been able to remain asymptomatic, and she can carry on. But my God, she, like you said, endo is sometimes genetic. And my mom realized through researching all of my stuff, she was like, oh my goodness, I probably had an endometriosis as well growing up. She just thought the period pain and heavy bleeding was normal, and she didn't have a family that really advocated for her. So she just went through it. But it's sad because now she doesn't have a kidney.
Yeah. And that's the, and it harkens back to extra pelvic endo. And this, I think there's been a lot of headway when we talk about people knowing, or at least recognizing the word endometriosis, but still correlating it with a bad period or bad
Mhm.
cramping, and not realizing that no, this actually can kill organs, vital organs, um,
Yes.
that could, can result in all kinds of complications, that could be life threatening: bowel obstruction, kidney failure. What if it's both kidneys and not just one, where one is functioning? I mean, there's so many things, lung collapse. And the diaphragm very much is one of the organs that leads to lung collapse with endo. Um, I think one of my first surgeries, they found a little bit, as they said, burnt out endo on my diaphragm. Just,
Oh
you know,
my goodness.
just where it stopped growing on its own. But there's so much more mystery to the disease than there are answers. And that's why I feel like the generation that we're in right now is the generation of persistence and pursuit
Yes.
of knowledge.
Yes.
Because we are demanding that a larger population of doctors pay attention to this patient population that is underserved. And I think that
Yes.
the endo population is a very well educated one, because they have to do so much of the work themselves.
Seriously, at this point, you and I probably feel like we could be doctors. I mean,
Sometimes.
it's
Yeah.
the education. It breaks my heart, Diana. I meet so many women who, have endo and PCOS, and they go, oh yeah, I got surgery. And, they're still in the most horrible pain because they went to a surgeon who did ablation and not excision. And I mean, I'm hearing these stories that they can't get pregnant, and it's heartbreaking because if they only had the information, they can live their life, but now they're still in turmoil, and it's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking illness. It really
Yeah.
is. Um, and it's so wholly systematic. It attacks everything. Like you and I were even talking about just the diet. I know for some people it's less of an impact, but I feel as I've gotten older, especially, that I have to be more cognizant of what I eat. And I was the girl who went to like McDonald's all the time and considered that
Yes.
a healthy meal. And now I'm like, oh no, if I do that, I'm going to inflame. Like my knuckles are going to inflame. My kneecaps actually swell. And it's an inflammatory disease. And as much as you want to pretend on the good days it's not there, it's just dormant. It's
Exactly. It's the cruelest ongoing disease, honestly, in my opinion, because people look at you and you look fine from the outside and they expect you to be high functioning and going to work and hustling and, keeping up with daily life. And some days you can't. I mean, some days I really can't get out of bed and I can't, it's a tough subject to communicate to my work or to like, I've mentioned like dating, like if I've had to cancel on dates because my symptoms have been so bad and that's not fun either. So
and the other thing too, it's like, again, it's like being single with endometriosis is a whole topic, and you should come back just to discuss that, because I certainly don't want to give, not that it's a sob story, but you also don't want to share more than you're ready to share with someone and explain why you're not drinking or explain why you're not eating the gluten or whatever it might be that you need to do for your endo, and having to open yourself up. I always laugh about, I had a first date, this was years ago, when I was like first diagnosed or what have you. And it was a dinner and he goes, hey, I Googled, you have like a disease, huh? And I was like, yeah. And I said, endometriosis. He goes, yeah, that hard one to say. It's like, is that like contagious? And I was like, oh God. And like,
yeah.
and, and I had to go into this whole thing, and it felt very much like I was the Mayo Clinic professor. And I'm like, this just got awkward, like so awkward.
It's I can relate to that 5,000%. We should do a segment on being single and having endo because nobody needs to know that information on the first date. They just don't.
Yeah. And even when maybe even if it's like 5 or 6, it's like, it's just a lot to talk about. A lot to
It
talk
is.
about. It's so intimate. And that's why when I have someone like you coming on, and especially, I always say it doesn't matter what profession you have, no one is immune to how endo impacts their life.
Mhm.
And with your job and your public life, it is extremely brave to come forward and say that you struggle with something. But I will say you also, even though it's a struggle, you're triumphant, because your attitude, your perspective, your hope, that's what makes you victorious. And that's what also makes you the goddamn good athlete that you are. Because you take that ethos that you live with for your work and you put that into your life, and it shows.
Thank you so much. Well, I wish I would have, talked about this sooner. This is something I've been dealing with for the past 4, 5 years. But, like you said, it's a very personal and intimate topic, but I'm at the point to where I'm too passionate about it. I know too much information. And for me to gatekeep that, it just doesn't feel right anymore. There's that something in me saying to share my story. So that's what I want to do. I don't want to gatekeep, and I want to talk about it. And I want to try to help, share what's been key for me to, live with endometriosis. I just want to share it and help other women as well. So, and I admire so much what you do. I saw your content and it really, for the first time, not that long ago, and it really sparked, that fire in me to do the same. So I honestly owe this to you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I feel like we're all helping each other, because we're going to do it. I always say it's one voice at a time, and
Yeah.
we're going to be loud. We're going to make change.
Yes.
And we are making change.
Yes. Yes. I know. Yeah. It's easy to get in a negative mindset, but like you said, we have come a long ways from even 5, 10 years ago. So excited to, keep on pushing and spreading the word.
Thank you. And we'll have you again and again, because there's a lot to cover
There's too much.
to interpersonal dynamics, the whole thing. So we've got a lot to talk about.
Awesome. Thank you for having me so much.